To say that I'm obsessed with personal finance is an understatement, but I've struggled to find someone I can relate to who can provide sound money advice, partly because in generations past, my culture has frowned upon these types of discussions. The Check Your Money podcast was created in my quest to find a space of support and network of people just like me that want to grow financially. I'm excited to share ways you can improve your current and future financial health, set and meet money goals, and even plan for retirement in this ever-changing economy. I hope that by the end of this episode, you'll say to yourself at least once, I need to check my money today. Hi, and welcome back to Check Your Money. In my first episode, I talked about women and borrowing. But your ability to borrow, once we got past the patriarchal nonsense, is all about your credit, specifically your credit score. So, surprisingly, higher credit scores don't have a lot to do with money or even credit confidence. In 2018, African Americans with credit scores of 700 or above were 80% more likely to say that they live paycheck to paycheck than the general population of adults with prime credit scores, which is, over 700. And 700 is good. Aside from that, Latinos are more likely to say that they're not happy with their credit scores than other populations. In 2016, 37% of Latinos said that they were dissatisfied with their credit scores compared to 32% of Americans overall. So, what ends up happening is that you don't even want to know what it is. Honestly, whenever I log in to either check my score or my credit report, I close my eyes and I get this awful feeling in the pit of my stomach like, oh my God, here we go. Like, what am I going to find? And I'm not alone. In 2016, 54% of Latinos said that they had checked their credit scores in the last year compared to 60% of the general population. So that's half, right? And 20% had never checked their score at all compared to 14% of the general population. And why not? Well, they either had no reason to, which is what 40% said. They hadn't gotten to it, which is what 35% said. And 29% that said that they were afraid that it would be a low number. In 2016, 72% of Latinos said that they wanted to improve their score over the next year compared to 66% of the general population. And I know I'm throwing out a lot of stats out here, but again, I just want you to see that if you're feeling this way, you are not alone. There are a lot of other people feeling this way. Latino millennials were most driven to improve their scores, with 78% of them wanting to improve their scores over the next year. But how can you improve on something when you don't even have a starting point? You don't even know where you are. Well, let's talk about this. So if you've got a low score, it makes it harder to take out personal loans. We all know this, right? Personal loans play a big part in today's economy. You need a score to get a house, you need a score to get a car. And these are only the big things, but no one really talks about the little things that you need a credit score for. When it comes to private student loans, if you've got parents with a good credit score, this is so important because students haven't developed their credit history. So they've got nothing going on credit wise. And private lenders, they're not just going to throw money at a kid and say, here, go to school. But we don't know if you're going to pay us back. So they want that, parent to co-sign. And if your parents don't have a good credit score, you're not going to get a good deal on private student loans. And I'll talk about what that means. Aside from student loans, if you're trying to start a business, that also requires a loan because no one really has, well, I'm not going to say no one, but the people who don't have the money to cover the cost of opening or operating a business are going to need a loan. But before your business credit score is established, the lenders want to know that you've got a good personal credit score, which can make it harder for minorities to start their own businesses, even if that business could help them get ahead economically. Now, how about this thing called credit invisible? Yeah, that's a thing. So a credit invisible person is when you don't have a record of credit with the three credit rating agencies, which are Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. So I'm not knocking Dave Ramsey, but I had listened to one of his podcasts once a couple months ago. I mean, I don't know who he is, obviously, and I follow some of his stuff. I kind of pick and choose what I like. But on this particular episode, there was a caller that had questions on how to increase their score or something like that. And he literally said, like a little sassy, if I could say so myself. But he literally said, for what? So you could get in more debt? Again, I'm not knocking him, but that's not the only reason why people want to have good credit. They use your credit score to quote your car insurance. And that's not more debt, that's a necessity. So for almost 20% of the Americans who are credit invisible, like I said before, it makes it harder to buy a house. It makes it harder to get a car, but it's also more expensive to turn on your utilities and harder to get a job, or can be harder to get a job. Yeah, I said a job. Nowadays, it's actually quite possible that for some jobs within a company or some employers in general, they may actually require a credit check. Why? Well, your credit history isn't just about generating a number to borrow money. This number is very powerful because it actually shows people how responsible you are. It's the only thing they have to go by. If you're constantly late on payments, how will you be with work-related deadlines? It says something about you. Whether it's true or not, it says something about you. If you're in a ton of debt, and don't get offended here, but they don't know you from a hole in the wall. So how can they be sure that you're not going to steal from them to meet your obligations? Again, all they have to go off of is this number. Latinos are almost twice as likely to be credit invisible than whites. How do you become credit invisible? Well, you know how I talked about the generations of Latinos using Bank of Mattress? And since they don't trust banks, what a lot do, and I know people who do this, they get one of those prepaid cards. So you go to like Walmart and you get a card through them. I'm sure there's other places, but I know somebody who did the Walmart thing. But by doing this, they can get a card that can be loaded by their employer with their wages. Also, and hypothetically speaking, if you owe a bank fee and they won't let you open up an account with them without paying them what you owe them, this is what you would have to do in order to get a debit card and get direct deposit. Don't think you can owe one bank and be slick and open up an account in another bank. They use a system that shows them what you owe and it follows you. So if you owe Bank of America and you try to walk into Chase and, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, they're not going to give you a bank account without paying what you owe Bank of America. In 2013, Unidos US put out a survey that said 64% of Latinos said that they use cash for everyday transactions and 61% use the debit card. I don't know if this is a mix of the prepaid one and the bank one, but that, it's still a high number. But anyway, my point is that if you're using one of these prepaid cards and you don't own a house and you don't have a car loan because you paid cash and you just never tried to get a credit card or just have chosen not to borrow at all, then you, my friend, are credit invisible. I also read that in 2015, 8% of all home purchase loans were made to Latinos, 8%, and 5% to Black borrowers. Lending standards have just gotten insane because of the Great Recession. I mean, back in the day, you could refinance or mortgage with very little documentation or scrutiny. Nowadays, be prepared to provide your grandmother's kindergarten report card if you want to get a mortgage, because that's the kind of stuff they ask for, like crazy. Okay, not, they're not really going to ask for that, but you get like they ask for so much nonsense, so much paperwork, so much documentation. Because, they need to know that you're a low risk for them to lend money to you. And with Latino borrowers being less likely than white borrowers to have a credit score and a full credit history, we appear to be riskier to lenders than we really are. And in general, all races, all population, many families lost their homes to foreclosure after the 2007 financial crisis. So their score sank immediately. And those people are still struggling to rebuild their credit. And everything goes hand in hand. Meaning, if those people are still trying to rebuild their credit, then the housing market is still being affected 13 years later. So when you think about it, in order to rebuild the housing market, you need to rebuild your credit score. And that goes for those that want to own a home because not everybody's goal is to own a home, and that's okay. Whatever your thing is, that's okay. But my point is that it all goes hand in hand. And when we talk about generational wealth, passing down stuff to our children or our heirs, real estate seems to be one of the ways that this has, historically been done. And then lastly, in talking about the importance of a good score, I came across this pretty interesting title of an article that said, "Are credit scores racist?" which caught my eye, but it was actually, a really interesting perspective. They talked about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which obviously, it made, not obviously, but it made it illegal to deny you a loan or charge you a higher interest rate solely based on race. But the fact is, if you've listened to my other episodes, there are some things that are related that affect your score. So that, they are racially related. Without rehashing the stats, I've talked about how we earn less. And while your income isn't on your credit report, obviously, if you earn less, then you have less money to pay your loans and credit card balances with. Your family credit history. I've talked about how statistically our financial literacy has been lacking. So, the history of financial discrimination and lack of literacy can affect future generations. But not you, because you're here. You wouldn't be listening if you didn't want to break out of that. So, just ignore that one. Your credit score is your financial power. As I've already stated, a low one affects your ability to take out a loan, or at least one with a good rate. And this is how I recently explained it to my kid. If you have a low score, the bank thinks you're a high risk. The interest rate they charge you is a fee to lend you money. It's how they make money. But if you have a good score, they think you're a lower risk. This means that you're more likely than not to pay them back and to pay them back on time. To reward you for this, they charge you a lower rate. And I got into that discussion with her because she recently graduated, which I've talked about. So her private loans are about to come due. She'll get a little break from the federal ones because of COVID. But because I have a good score, I can co-sign and get her a good deal on her private loan. And again, if owning a home isn't your thing, or student loans aren't a concern, or anything else I've brought up, maybe you've got the itch to start a business like, I talked about before. Again, that's going to require a loan if you don't have enough money saved up. So your score is important. How can you get a handle on this score? I don't know if you've heard about Anchor, but it is seriously the easiest way to make a podcast. The very best part about it is that it's free. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, your computer, or your tablet. I was able to easily set up my podcast right from my iPad. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it could be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and many more. And last but not least, you can actually make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And because you're able to get sponsors right from your site, it just makes it so much easier. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, which makes it so easy for anyone to use. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Your credit score is something you have to protect, like an iPhone you chose not to get insurance on. Many of us don't even get paper statements anymore. So you're probably barely reading past that summary email that gives you your balance, your payment due, and your due date. So you don't even have a true picture of what's going on. And okay, so I've said credit score like I was 20, 30, 40 times. What is it? With the exception of employment, your credit score is a 3-digit number that lenders who are trying to lend you money use to help them decide the likelihood of you paying them back on time or at all. The score is based on what is reflected in your report. So you've got your credit score and you've got your credit report. They are related, but they are, not the same thing. If you check your credit report, you can see your payment history, but also your loan balances and your, all of the different accounts that you have. All of this will help you figure out how to fix your credit and in turn your score. And I say fix, but you know what I mean. Just try to correct it, try to put it on the right track, make it all green. According to the credit score company FICO, which is what FICO is, it's actually a company. 35% of your score is based on your record of on-time payments of loans and credit cards. But let's say you're invisible, like I talked about before. Did you know you could actually ask them to take your on-time utility payments, phone, and cable as well? If you've been making, your light bill and your cell phone bill payments on time, there's actually a way for you to improve your score by factoring those payments into your report. And it's through this new free product from Experian called Experian Boost. So you would have to opt into that product, and you, the consumer, can allow Experian to connect to your bank account. So this is, depending on how much you trust, but you allow them to connect to your bank account. It's Experian. I mean, they're a good company. So they connect to your bank account to identify utility and telecom payment history. After you verify the data and confirm that you want it added to your Experian credit file, an updated FICO score will actually be delivered in real time. You can visit Experian.com, and this is something I found in my research, not working with them or anything like that, but it's EXPERIAN.com/boost to register. You sign up for a free Experian membership, and you'll actually get a free credit report and FICO score immediately. The other thing you could do is to become an authorized user on an account, as long as they use their credit responsibly. This one's can be a bit on the wild side depending on who it is. As the person doing the adding, you don't want to add someone that is irresponsible and give them the card that you're adding them to. Let's just say if you do this for one of your kids, maybe don't give them the card. Just, like I said, just add them. The card will come in the mail. Just, whatever, put it away. But it's a way, for a credit invisible person to establish a score. Another way is to apply for a secured credit card. So the way a secured credit card works is you're basically securing the card with your money. And this is really good for somebody who doesn't have a credit history at all, or someone that has a bad credit history and is starting to rebuild. I did a little research and I found that Capital One, and I like Capital One. I actually have a Capital One card, but Capital One has a secured MasterCard, and there were a few that popped up, but this is the one that I liked. It seems really good for building credit at a low cost, because some of the other ones that I found actually had an annual fee, which is in addition to the money that you have to give them to secure your card. So this one has no annual fee, has no foreign transaction fee, which, if you're going to go travel somewhere once COVID is done. And they offer a $200 starting credit limit in return for a refundable security deposit that could be as low as $49. So what this means is they will give you a $200 credit limit, and depending if you qualify, you would only have to send them $49. That is securing your card. And that's not a fee. That's actually just a deposit, your money sitting there. The deposit could also be $99 or $200. And again, this all depends on the specifics of your credit history and your current state of finances. This secured card reports to the three major credit bureaus every month. So, like I said, it could be partially secured is when you only send them, 49 or the $99. But you will have to make some sort of deposit for this $200 spending limit. And again, it could be the $200. But it's a good way to establish the history, to make on-time payments. So you might just be using your $200, so you're sending it back and forth, but they're reporting to the credit bureau, so it will improve your credit because again, they're reporting the account activity. So as long as you continue to pay your bill on time and you avoid maxing out your limit, which yes, it's a thing. Like if you have a $200 limit and you're at 175 and you make a $50 purchase, it might go through. And this is what you don't want. You don't want to affect your score. It with lacking the monthly and one-time fees that some of these cards charge, this is actually a really good card for somebody again with bad credit or with no credit at all. This card, you can't get it if you have a non-discharged bankruptcy, if you have a past due Capital One credit card or an over limit Capital One credit card. You can't have one that has been charged off in the past year. And your monthly income has to exceed your monthly housing payment by at least $425. You also have to connect it to an authorized bank account in order to make that security deposit. And the nice thing about it is that you're automatically considered for a higher credit limit in as little as 6 months with no additional deposit. So if you keep a good history with them, you can start building up your credit. Let's get back to the score for the non-invisibles. There are actually a lot of different companies that create credit scores, but FICO is the most popular, and they range from 300 to 850. So that's what your score would be. Generally, no matter what scoring model is used, here's what they take into consideration: payment history on loans and credit cards, how much revolving credit you use. If you have a credit card and you use it, then you pay it, then you have money available to you to use again, that's revolving credit. So just, picture the door, going round and round. Also, the types of account you use, meaning if you have a good mix. So they want to know that you can pay your car loan and your credit card. You care about everything equally, not just the stuff that can get repoed. And that doesn't mean go get different stuff just to improve your credit. You want to just get the credit that you need. But this is what they look at. And side note, you don't even have to carry a monthly credit card balance to build your history. You can pay off your credit card bills completely to zero every month and positively affect your credit standing. Lastly, they look at how often you apply for new credit. Basically, don't try to do too many things at once because it looks like you're desperate for money and it makes your score go down. If you're shopping around for a few things, you should probably get your score yourself and shop around telling them your score as opposed to having them pull it. And they can do what they call a soft pull, which doesn't affect your score. A hard pull does. If you're not 100% sure that you're going to go through them, whatever it is that you're looking for, it's in your best interest to make sure they only do a soft pull or that you provide them with the number that you already pulled yourself. When you pull it yourself, it doesn't affect your score. Just keep in mind if you do this, that you can't hold them to whatever price they give you because ultimately it will depend on the number they get when they run it. They can give you like a ballpark. This is what your monthly payment will be for whatever it is you're shopping around for. If you've done this already, don't worry too much. Hard inquiries only stay on your credit report for 2 years anyway. There are credit repair companies that can help you figure out how to increase your score by looking at your report and helping you. And some of them are great. Some of them maybe not so great. But if you understand the reasons that help or hurt your FICO score, then you can work on this yourself for the most part. Honestly, it's not that hard to clean it up. It's just time consuming. And I don't just mean sit there and work on it time and go through the steps time. I mean actual time passing. So, step one, get your FICO score. You can get your score from either Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, or your credit card might even offer it on their website. The thing about these, I just talked about, is that they use what's called a Vantage score, which is calculated differently than a FICO score. So my suggestion is just go to FICO, get your FICO score. You can go on freecreditscore.com. And they used to actually require a credit card to get your score. I didn't even realize that they stopped doing that. But the site is now part of Experian, and you can get your monthly FICO score for free without entering any payment information. So you just have to verify who you are. I'm sure they're going to ask questions like, where'd you live when you were 4? But you're going to have to verify that data, and then you can get your score. Your free membership will also provide Experian monitoring alerts. These alerts include either emails for either new credit inquiries, new accounts, fraud alerts, and information updates. But you're going to have to remember to log in every month to see your updated score because they don't send regular updates about your exact score. But this is nice if you're trying to get a handle of it and you want to know what's going on and you want to be alerted to anything. When you do get your score, you're also going to get information about which factors are affecting it the most. These risk factors will help you understand the changes that you can make to start improving your score. And then just keep in mind that you need to give it some time for any changes that you make to be reported by your creditors, so the people you owe money to, and be reflected in your credit score. So you've got your score. After this, you're either going to fall over or you're going to think, oh, okay, not too bad. When you get your score, though, like I said, you're going to get information about what's affecting your score the most. Now you can run your report. Annualcreditreport.com is where you can go to run your report. Generally speaking, you could run it once every 12 months. Because of COVID, you could actually run it once a week through next April. So if you're trying to correct anything on your credit report, now's a good time to do that because you could just keep checking it and checking it and checking it. If that's what you want, please do not get obsessed. I'm just saying it is available to you if you want it, as opposed to having to wait once a year. When you run it, look it over and take your time. But here's what I want you to focus on. Do you recognize everything? If you see something that doesn't belong to you, you need to dispute that. It could be identity fraud or identity theft, or it could be a mistake that you need to have deleted from there. Do you have anything in collections? These stay on your report for 7 years. That's a whole episode. So I'll just keep this one simple for now. A couple years ago, I saw I was in collections with the dentist for like $100, but I know I paid that. So I called her, and as it turns out, yeah, it was a mistake. She was able to have it deleted from my credit report. If you have stuff that's legitimately in collections, like I said, let's just leave that for now. I'm not saying it's not important, but your score is mainly based off of the last 2 years of stuff you're doing wrong or right. The biggest things, which represent like 70% of your score, is your payment history and what's called either a debt to credit ratio, utilization, or balance to limit ratio. These are the things that affect your score. Those 2 things I just talked about. So you get on your credit report, look at that Chase account, or I'm just going to say Chase as an example. You're going to see a summary. And then you're going to see like a year with a chart with little circles that will either say okay, or they'll have a number, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. Those are reflecting days you've been late in that particular month, in that particular year. You might see CLS, which is closed. Not necessarily a bad thing. You might have closed it. They might have closed it. And on that topic right now, the credit card companies are trying to reduce their exposure, which means they don't want a lot of money out there if you don't have a job and they don't think they're going to get paid back. I am seeing post upon post on a lot of the Facebook groups that I follow of people saying, "Hey, I got my credit card closed. Hey, I got my credit limit reduced. Is this happening to anybody else?" It's happening to everybody else. So if you've got a card you haven't used in a while and you want to keep it, I suggest you start putting gas on that card and then paying it off at the end of the month, because they will shut you down right now. The other thing you might see is CO, which is a charge off. If you see a lot of OKs, then you're good. If you see some numbers, then this is the account that you need to work on. And by work on, you need to maintain on-time payments. Keep in mind that the older the payment, the less effect it has on your credit score than the recent ones. So if you were late once, like 4 years ago, and you've been fine ever since, then don't even worry about this. I personally have a lot of stuff on, or everything actually, on either auto pay, minimum payment, or auto pay a certain amount, like 50 or 150, depending. So I don't miss anything. Then when I've worked out my month, like when I sit there, I go in, and if I want to make a bigger payment, I log in and I do that. I keep a little planner book. The page is like the size of my hand. And I write PD for payday every other Friday. Then when I get that email from, let's say, Chase, and it says your minimum payment is $35, that triggers me to log in and see if I want to bump that up. Then I write down $35 or whatever into the date that it's going to come out on my planner. But when I get overloaded with emails or I've got stuff going on in my life, I don't have to worry, because no matter what, I already know that at least the minimum payment is going to get there when it's due, because I already have it set. So if you log in and just set auto pay, it takes you less than a minute. You can pick, like I said, the minimum payment or the total payment or a set amount. And that's it. Now you fix that problem and you just sit back and let time handle the rest. You can do this with your cable. You can do this with your light. You can do this with your cell phone. I'm not saying be hands off, but what I am saying is that life gets in the way sometimes, and you might forget to log in and make a payment, and that's what hurts your score. Second, the credit report will also show your credit limit. For the sake of this example, let's say your credit limit is $1,000. Your balance shows that you owe them $350, which is 35% of your available credit with, I'm going to stick with Chase. That is your debt to credit ratio. Lenders generally like to see ratios of 30% or less. A low credit utilization ratio, it tells lenders that you haven't maxed out your cards, and it shows that you know how to manage your credit well. I'm finding contradictory data, so I'm not sure if this is per account or as a whole. I think it's as a whole, to be honest, which means they add all of your balances and divide it by your available credit for all of your scores. Either way, if you can get them down by account, I would recommend doing that just in case. Like, you want to get it under 30%. So let's just say you have something that is slightly over that 30% mark. Over percent as a whole, by something manageable, if you can make a payment to get you under that 30%, then you should see a change in your score. For example, Kohl's, my limit is $1,500. I've mentioned it in the past. I moved a couple months ago, so I'm still, getting things and getting acclimated. And I noticed that I was at like a $560 balance or something, which puts me over 30%. I made sure I immediately paid $75 to get me back under. So that this is something that you want to keep an eye on, and if you can make a payment to get you under, then I suggest doing that. So those are the positive things, or the actionable things you could do to affect your score. Some of the things that you can do that will hurt your score, or one of the major things is this, which you don't want to do this. And this is only if you're trying to increase your score or at least keep it the same. Do not close any accounts. So when you close stuff, it affects that utilization because it lowers the amount available to you. And if you have balances on other accounts, this will now increase your ratio, which is bad. If you have a card that has an annual fee you don't want, or you don't need that card, I'd suggest if you want to keep the card, call them and see if they could waive the fee. If you don't want to keep the card and you're not worrying about your score, then go ahead and close it. It's one less thing to worry about. But you don't want to just go closing off cards if you're working on your score. You really just want to leave them alone. Your credit score can be a powerful tool that can open doors and can close them. Fix it, guard it, and keep it up. Yeah, I know. Corny joke. Check your knowledge. You might have heard about this recently if you're listening to this real time, about this no payroll tax thing. I automatically thought, oh, yay, cool. I'm going to get more money in my paycheck next week. But I looked into it, and this is how the IRS is explaining it. So on August 28th, IRS issued a notice. It's 2020-65 on the deferral, keyword being deferral, of employee payroll tax obligations. What does this mean? Employers can defer the withholding of the payment of the employee portion of basically FICA, which is 6.2% tax that gets imposed on on the employee wages. So there's a lot of words here. The key word is deferral. The key word is employers. And the key word is employers can defer. This deferral applies to taxes on wages paid from September 1st through December 31st. The payroll taxes are deferred, not forgiven. So if anybody, if you guys heard about the mortgage where you were able to defer your payments for 90 days when COVID first started, the whole COVID pandemic, what they did was they said, oh, you don't have to make your payment for 90 days. But at the end of the 90 days, you have to pay what you owe us. So, and I can't remember if I've said it here. I know I've said it to a lot of people, but if I don't have the $1,500, whatever your mortgage payment is, to pay you this month or next month or the month after because I'm not working, what on earth makes you think I'm going to have $4,500 saved up somehow to give you at the end of the 90 days? That's how this is pretty much working. Number one, the employers are not required to defer the withholding of your payroll taxes. It is something they can opt out of, I believe it is. I don't know if it's opting in or opting out, but they decide. So if you haven't gotten a notice from your employer that they're going to withhold wages, chances are just expect your check is going to look the same. That's number one. Number two, from what I'm reading, if your employer decides to opt in, you as an employee cannot opt out. Again, this is what I'm reading. This all just happened. So maybe by the time you read this, it might change a little bit, but just look into it. I just want to throw the information out there so that you're armed with knowledge and you know what this is all about, right? So at the end of December 31st, 2020, guess what? It's a deferral. which means they want their money. They're not saying, oh, no, you don't have to pay us at all. They're saying, oh, you don't have to pay us for 3 months. So now the employers have to figure out how they're going to get their money back to send it to the IRS, because the IRS wants their money. Okay. They're giving them from January 1st, 2021 through April 30th, 2021 to pay back the money that was withheld. So your job may, they got to figure it out. Are they going to get it from you, or who knows? I mean, I'm sure every employer is going to, maybe you're going to have some nice people, nice employers that are going to say, oh, we'll cover it. I don't know. This is all specific to your situation, to your job. Also, this deferral would be available to employees who have wages of less than $4,000 gross in a bi-weekly payroll period. So the way that works out is if you're earning less than $104,000 in salary, then this would apply to you. So, same as the mortgage thing. If they don't take out the taxes now and you get an extra $250 in your check now, come January, chances are you're going to get $250 less. So you're going to spend all that money now, and then come January, you got to pay the piper. So now that's a bill that you're going to have. Personally, if you get an extra $250 and you know that you're going to struggle in January having to pay that $250 back, just put the $250 in a bank account, in a savings, high yield, whatever. They're not that high right now, but put it away. Just don't even use it unless you really need it. But just know that come January, chances are you got to pay this. So, or it's going to come out of your paycheck. Your paycheck's going to be $250 short to make up for it. Every employer, I'm sure, is going to decide something different. You might have a great situation where you don't have to pay it back. But right now, this is how it's reading. So just check your knowledge. That's it. Providing the information. Thank you so much for listening. I know I've got a lot of new people that have joined over the last few weeks, and I am so grateful. You don't even know how grateful I am. I've said it before. I spent a lot of time on getting this information together. I've gotten a lot of feedback that people appreciate the fact that it's organized, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that I'm not talking to myself, and that you're getting something out of it, that people are taking notes, that people are learning, that it is encouraging people to check their money, because that's what I want. I want you at least one time to say, I need to check my money. Hasta la próxima. Thanks again for listening to the Check Your Money podcast. I would love to hear from you. You can email me feedback at norma@checkyourmoney.today. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate at Apple or Google Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Also, if you can, please leave a review if you're enjoying this podcast. It's the easiest way to help it grow and be able to help continue to motivate and inspire others. The information provided in the Check Your Money podcast, associated social media accounts, and website is intended solely for the personal, non-commercial use of the user who accepts full responsibility of its use. While we have taken every precaution to ensure that the content of the aforementioned is both current and accurate, errors can occur. We accept no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content. The information provided by Check Your Money and its affiliated entities is general in nature, provided for educational purposes only, and should not be considered to be legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. In all cases, you should consult with professional advisors familiar with your personal factual situation for advice concerning specific matters before making any decisions.